Hello, hello. Welcome officially to day 2 of Reconnect, and we are going to talk all about embodiment and mind-body rituals. Today, we're going to build on from what we learned yesterday. I was going to say last night, and I'm like, that's not the right word. And most of all, we're going to dive into what we can do in regard to disconnection. And most importantly, the most valuable question we're going to learn today is, what does my system need and what is my system asking for? Because this is going to be a pivotal question as we move into day 2. All right, I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to hop in. I'm going to just get situated here so I'm comfy. And most importantly, we are here for day 2. Did you do the soul work? How is the soul work? Let me know. How was it? I feel like it's a little bit challenging to ask ourselves some of these questions, but it's so liberating to know what we can shift and change once we start to develop some awareness. How should we break this up? So if you are here with me, let me know how day 1 went. If you did the soul work, pop that in the chat. Let's start to get some conversation going if you're here with me. And most of all, when it comes to going into day 2, the hugest thing I want to really mention is this embodiment piece and the mind-body connection. So maybe we'll start a little bit with that. So one of the things that I've learned over the years is a lot of the times it's really easy to get caught up in the mindset work and, doing all of these different practices related to the mind. It's very common in spirituality to often focus on this. We're taught it all the time. We are taught a lot about top-down spirituality, where we only focus on the mind first and then often neglect the body. Think about practices in regard to meditation, affirmations, journaling, doing shadow work where we go in our head and pull up past memories. We have inner child healing sometimes, which also focuses a lot of the mindset work where we go into, how did I feel as a child? And we go into, what were my thoughts as a child and so forth. So there's different modalities that focus very heavily on the mind. And as we've been learning in day 1, it neglects the body. It completely neglects the body side. And if the mind does not believe, the feeling cannot live in the body. This was a teaching I learned in 2017 that has always stood the test of time with me in regard to connecting to the mind-body connection. Because when you start to look at the mind-body connection as a whole, most people are only nourishing their mind, and they wonder why they have so much problem going on, because they are completely neglecting the body side. So kind of giving you a bit of a recap from day 1, disconnection is often due to disconnecting from the body. And as we learned why disconnection happens, it puts us in the survival brain. It gets us in, that fight, flight, freeze response. And as a result, what happens? Well, in regard to that, we start to get dysregulated. Slowly, we disconnect the mind from the body. And because of that sensation going on, we often neglect the body and we only focus on the mind. And that's where we have past and future thinking. That's where we ruminate. That's where we get stuck overthinking, overanalyzing, and even getting caught up in overdoing, right? Because we're trying to do so much action or so much momentum to overcompensate, because in our body, we don't feel fully enough to step back, allow, relax, receive, and so forth. And that's where we have that overgiver mentality, right? So we have all of these different conversations happening all the time between our mind and our body. But if we're constantly neglecting the body is holding all of these past associations of memory, and the body is holding all of this beautiful wisdom for us to heal, to know ourselves better, to strengthen our intuition, and we are just living in our head. And to say that we don't always go into the body is, obviously not necessarily true. There are moments where you're present. There are moments where, you're obviously more present than others and so forth. However, the majority of us, when we get caught up in disconnection and we feel disconnected, what is often happening is we are disconnected from the body. Now, to give you kind of a little bit more of this recap, we have that disconnection going on, right? So the mind-body connection is always happening. Now, because of this, the body is ruled by the subconscious mind. And this means that our subconscious mind holds all of our programming, our past thoughts, past feelings, past habits, and so forth. And it creates our programming. So if you did any of my chakra challenges in the past, if you've done any of the chakra work, we've talked about this. If you're new here, basically from 0 to 7, you download all of your programming. And this gets lodged in your body, in your subconscious. And your subconscious is holding the entire script of your programming. How you believe, how you think, how you feel, how you like to do behaviors and habits, and how you take action. Everything is connected to that energetic body, and it's dominated by the subconscious. So in order to actually change anything that's happening in the subconscious mind, we have to establish the mind-body connection and create awareness to actually shift and change something. For example, this is really what's happening when we go through emotional healing. It's not just happening in the mind, and it's also not just happening in the body. It's happening together as a system, as an interconnected system that's weaving together. One of my favorite things that I love to talk about is the concept of recognizing that your beliefs are created through your thoughts, emotions, and habits. And when you understand that this is the pattern that's running and looping in your nervous system, this is what's creating the habit and why you're in a particular, situation or a relationship or so forth. And then that gets lodged in one of your chakras. And then that becomes the moment where you recognize to heal and change that, you have to establish the mind-body connection with the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, and the body, the emotions, the subconscious, and so forth, and bringing it into awareness. And that's how we actually establish real healing in the body, is because we're taking something from awareness, we're moving it through our body, and we're reprogramming it with repatterning work. This is something I go really heavily into in my session work and most of all, the Chakra Academy. But to stay focused where we're at, I just wanted to kind of give you a placeholder if you're new to my work, because this will help set the pace for today. So when it comes to the mind-body connection, this is how we reestablish balance. What it means to really establish balance. What the heck does that even mean, right? So, we hear this all the time. Energy balance. I got to realign my chakras. I got to get into spiritual alignment. Well, what's actually happening is you are establishing 3 different pillars that are going on in your nervous system all the time. Your mind, your body, and your soul. Now, most people will just say, well, I just have the body going on, or I just have the mind going on. But that isn't necessarily true, because with the body, we have regulation. With the mind, we have focused direction. Focused direction and intention. Where is our focus? Where is our intention? Is it way out in left field? Or is it honed in and present? Or are we way out in the future, trying to be anxious of what's going to happen? Or are we way in the past, scared, tired, depressed, sad, upset? Or are we present? Are we present in our intentions? And then finally, the soul, which if we really want to just mansplain it, the soul is all about intuition. Because when you are empowered in your intuition, you are directly speaking to the spiritual side of you that is connected to your soul. And I always see it this way, because when you realize that you have a spiritual self, a physical self, emotional self. All of these different systems are happening simultaneously, right? We have the energetic self, we have the mindset, then we have, the spiritual self that is focused more on our intuition side of the same things. If we break it down systematically, habitually, and almost practically, what's happening is the mind body connection. And those three pillars are what's ruling the entire system and how you can actually reestablish balance. So when we talk about getting regulated, spiritual alignment, reestablishing reconnection to self, these are all the same thing. It's the mind-body connection working. And when the mind-body connection is working, we can emotionally heal, we can manifest, we have the whole system back, as we say these days, locked in. We have the whole system locked in because what's happening is the mind and the body are in harmony. And I always like to say it's almost like this beautiful vision. If you can think about it, like as a visual person, is like it's almost like a pillar of light. And you're kind of reestablishing that pillar. So when you work with the mind and the body, it's rooting down that pillar into the ground. You're now grounded and you are centered in your body. And now you can take the action that you need to take. Now you're in a flow state, so you know the right action to take. You reestablish that connection with your intuition, and the mind-body connection starts working in harmonic resonance with the world around you. And when you start to realize that when disconnection happens, what's happening is you're disconnecting the mind from the body, that pillar can't sustain itself. It gets stuck in your head. So it's kind of like the energy has nowhere to travel because it's all getting stuck in the higher chakras. We could even be as simple as to say it's just literally getting stuck in your head and not moving through the body. And that's where the disconnect of the mind-body connection happens. So when we start to look at the mind-body connection, I want you to really think about how can we move on from just being aware? Because a lot of the times, and I see this a lot in the industry, we regulate and we try to move on and we have a hard time moving on. Why is that? Why do we have such a hard time with just being aware? Well, I'll tell you why. Because we're not doing it consistently and we're not changing anything. We're becoming aware and we don't shift and change anything. We become aware and then we don't shift. We become aware and nothing new actually occurs. And why is that happening? Because the mind and the body need to reestablish connection. And that can only happen when you're working with the three pillars. And the reason for this is actually so simple that we kind of miss it. And it's really a simple question. It's, what is my system asking for? Today, what do I need? What does my body need? What does my soul need? What does my mind need? Because 9 times out of 10, that is not happening. 9 times out of 10, we are reactive and we're just going through life and we're not asking ourselves these questions. We're not making the space and time to be like, what does my mind need right now? Maybe I need more stillness. Maybe I need to think through this action I'm going to take. Maybe I need to create spaciousness. What does my body need? Maybe I need more movement. I need to get out of my head. I have to stop overthinking all the time. And so forth. What does my soul need? Maybe I need to spend more time in meditation. Or maybe I just need to simply stop, breathe, and do some oracle cards. Or maybe even it's more simple than that. I just need to stop and do some box breathing to help myself have more clarity. We're not asking these deeper questions. And when we don't ask ourselves these deeper questions, that's when we start to realize that the disconnection starts to rule our life, because we become more in habit towards dysregulation instead of regulation. And this is the problem, because when we recognize that it's actually just a habit, it's more a matter of watering the plant. It's more a matter of nourishing the body, nourishing the mind-body connection. When we recognize that it's truly about nourishing the mind-body connection, it changes the entire script that we're telling ourselves. Because I bet you're not asking yourself, what does my mind need? What does my body need? What does my soul need? Because that starts to bring things into awareness so that we can change them. And now you're not just aware, you are aware of what needs to shift and change. Because at the end of the day, that is what's happening. Is dysregulation exists for a reason so that you are aware enough to shift and change it, to shift and heal it, to shift and emotionally regulate, to shift and regulate your body to feel safe again. It is coming up for a reason. And I think that's the hugest disconnect of the whole situation, right? We have overthinking. We have all of this stuff come up for us. We have a particular situation that makes us have tons of negative emotion. We have a certain relationship that keeps repeating and keeps repeating as if we don't understand why we keep attracting, emotionally unavailable men. But we don't question that. We don't question the negative emotion. We don't question why the ego keeps showing up. And that's where the change actually occurs. But we're not willing to go there and question it. We're not willing to be like, why am I angry? Why am I overthinking? Right? So we did that on day 1. Now, the reality is your negative emotions exist for a reason. They exist for a reason because they are a signal showing you how to get back into alignment. They are a signal showing you how you have become misaligned from your true self, your healthy self, your embodied self, your regulated self. And it's showing you what needs to change so that you can heal it and you become more in balance with yourself, with the mind-body connection, where you reestablish a connection to self. That does not happen when we are completely in ignorance to the dysregulation. And instead, when we start to bring in awareness consistently, and then we ask ourselves what needs to change, then we're telling ourselves a different story, because we're not just sitting in awareness. We're not just sitting in regulation. It's one thing to get regulated. It's another to get regulated, have the awareness, and then start to be like, what does my system need so I can start to change it? That's where the pattern happens. That's where the shifts occur, because awareness is the catalyst towards change, but change cannot happen until you start asking yourself those deeper questions. And now here's the cool part. How the heck do we do this? Well, if we were to just break this down, okay? Because here's where it gets really cool. Because you can start to realize that this is why mind-body rituals are so incredibly powerful to regulate the body, bring clarity from the mind, and most of all, strengthen your natural intuitive gifts. In order to reestablish this, we have to start breaking it down. So, for example, let's start with the body, since we covered a lot of that on day 1. What does the body need? When we think about this, are we connected to the body? Because the body does not communicate in words. It communicates in sensations and often emotions. It communicates in body language and sensation. It does not communicate with words. So when we start to feel into the body, feeling tension, feeling contraction, feeling restless, feeling dizzy, shallow breathing, tension in the jaw, we're starting to establish where the body is having disconnection. And then we start to look at when the body is dysregulated, it does not need mindset or meditation like tools. It needs body rituals. And this is where it starts to get really cool, because you can recognize that you need different things for different connection. Different connection is related to different practices. That isn't to say, and I want to preface this because it's such a stigma in the spiritual community. This does not mean have 6-hour or 2-hour morning ritual and morning practice that, completely takes over your life. It's about realizing what do you need and giving it to yourself, intuitively tapping into what do you need. And that is where the conversation gets different, right? So I invite you to consider this before we go any further. Where do you feel like you're neglecting the most? Is it in the body? Is it in the soul? Or is it in the mind? I lost my train of thought. Or is it in the mind? Are you disconnecting more in the body, in the mind, or the soul? Because we're going to start breaking it down. So in the body, so let me know in the chat box. I see a few people watching. Let me know you're here. When we start to realize that when the body is dysregulated, it doesn't need mindset tools. It actually needs body awareness. So body awareness is a huge component of regulation. So when we realize that it actually needs rituals that reestablish connection to the body, we're talking about regulation tools, and we're also talking about mindful movement, because we have to reestablish connection to the body. The fastest way to do that is through movement. So if you were to just think about it, I keep needing to sneeze and it's like throwing me off. I'm okay. When it's like that terrible sensation. Okay. You know what? I'm just going to take a minute. Okay. It went away. Okay. So here's the thing. When it comes to body rituals, you need to reestablish that connection to safety in the body. And that is what is going to help the whole situation, because when you establish that in a body ritual, we're looking at more like, how can I connect back to the body in a way where I am regulated and present? And then, so for example, say that for you, you most are feeling disconnected in the body, then you need to start working on reconnecting back to the body. So for example, with the regulation tools and mindful movement. So working at yoga, Pilates, light exercise, light cardio, but not too much cardio, because cardio can veer into, adrenal fatigue and all of that. But reestablishing connection first is very powerful, because what is happening is you're really connecting to regulating yourself, and you're doing it consistently. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to establish like a 7-day ritual of exercising. It's more so about, like I said, giving yourself what you need. So if you find yourself overthinking, overanalyzing, getting caught up in your head, being ridiculously like in that flight response, you need the body ritual to start regulating you. And that's what we can start to look at, is start to kind of play with me here and ask yourself, how often are you nourishing the body? And I'm not just talking about eating. I'm talking about mindful movement, getting out of the head, back into the body. Are you reestablishing the connection? Are you working on regulating the body consistently? Because if you're not, and you're feeling disconnected, that's where to start. And the next one, let's talk about the soul. What does my soul need? Now, the soul is often one of the more common ones in the spiritual practice world, but at the same time, we have to connect back to our intuition and recognizing that the soul speaks strongly through our intuition. Now, if we're dysregulated, it's a hard time to hear our intuition. So, for example, say we're doing tons and tons of meditation, but we notice that we are getting stuck. Oh, this is so good. Because when you think about it, the overactive chakra thing, right? Like a lot of people, when they have a spiritual awakening, they have overactive chakras. Well, why is that happening? Because they're doing too much focus on the meditation, and they're feeling ungrounded, and they're caught up in outer space, and they're doing ayahuasca, and they're all up in the higher chakras. And because of that, there's no sense of groundedness in their spiritual practice. So common. When we realize that, hey, I can nourish my soul, I can, do the meditation, I can do the oracle cards, say spiritual prayer, do the ayahuasca drug trips, and do the shamanic journeying, but I'm neglecting the body, I'm neglecting what needs to happen to ground out all that energy. That's also a problem that is really prevalent in the spiritual community, is recognizing that we can have a soulful practice, but we neglect the body and the mind at the same time. So this is where the conversation gets deeper, right? So we can say, what does my soul need? And asking yourself, do you strengthen your intuition? Are you focused on your intuition? Do you practice your intuition? Do you connect to higher self? Do you connect to higher conscious daily? Do you connect with your natural gifts? Because if that isn't happening, then you need a soul ritual. You need to start thinking about, do I connect to my spiritual self daily, consistently? Or am I off in la la land where I sort of commit, but I don't commit? And then it's kind of like, I want to meditate, but I sort of don't want to meditate. And I hate sitting in silence. And okay, well, then that's a sign that you need to figure out a practice that actually helps you. Because a lot of the times when we aren't connected to the right soulful practice that really nurtures our intuition, then what's happening is we're disconnecting from how our intuition naturally speaks. And when we do that, that could be literally as simple as recognizing that meditation isn't for you, and instead it's automatic writing. Or it could be the opposite, where maybe writing isn't for you, but actually you need to speak out the channeling. It could also be as something as weird as where you need a hands-on practice to connect to your intuition. And so you can recognize here that your intuition speaks differently for all of us. And it's interesting how when you connect it back to your learner type, you can easily pinpoint how your intuition speaks. So for example, I'm a very visual person, and I'm a reader writer. So how my intuition speaks the strongest is actually through visions. I receive like downloaded visions through my claircognizance. And then I have that reader writer mentality where I connect through automatic writing and automatic channeled writing. And that's how I receive a lot of higher guidance and connecting more to higher consciousness, for example. But for somebody else, it could be totally different. It could be they need to sit in the meditation and they receive inner knowing and they have to act out that. Or maybe it's as simple as they need their audience and they get it through hearing. Everybody is different, and it's really important to establish how your intuition speaks the strongest. And so I'd like to segue here that I have a perfect quiz for you. If you are wondering, I have no clue what that is. I have a perfect quiz for you called the Empath Type Quiz, which helps you identify exactly what is your strongest gift and how to immediately start working with it. I highly recommend after this live going and taking the quiz. It is on my website at theawakenedstate.net/empath/quiz. And I highly recommend it because it shows you how immediately you can start to realize that maybe you're forcing yourself into a spiritual practice that is not even made for your intuitive type. And this is why you're having problems with inconsistency, not showing up, feeling like you're failing. Or a lot of people in the spiritual industry always say that, it's like, I can't get committed. I'm forcing myself to meditate, or I'm forcing myself to show up to yoga. It's possible that you're not doing the right practice that's made for you. Said with love. And so when it comes to soul rituals, this is exactly what we're talking about. What does my soul need? Maybe I need to automatic write. Maybe I need to sit in meditation. Maybe I need breath work. Maybe I need spiritual prayer right now. Connecting to your intuition is a personal experience to you. For example, you can connect to God consciousness. You can connect to higher self. You can connect to spirit guides. I don't judge, but it's more so about reestablishing the connection to you and your intuition at its core. And when you start to connect that piece, then we're starting to change the channel here, right? Because what were we doing before? In the body ritual, we're reestablishing regulation. In the soul ritual, we're reestablishing connection to our intuition. So what comes next is reestablishing our mindset of focused direction. So let's talk a little bit about that. So do you have any questions so far? So I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but I just want to break down why the mind-body connection works and why it's so powerful when we start to show up consistently for it. Because the mind-body ritual challenge is what's happening this week, and we're launching in May. And we are starting in May, on May 1st. And I would love it if you are deeply resonating with these topics to reach out and talk to me about it. Or you can sign up for the Mind Body Ritual Challenge, which we're going to take you behind the scenes of what this process is like and how you can establish your own mind body ritual and how to show up for it consistently so that you can start to regulate your body consistently, strengthen your intuition consistently, and most of all, have that focused direction to go where you want to go, because that is what it means to build confident intuition. And so that's what we're going to be diving into tomorrow in relationship to why a challenge is so powerful in connection to the Mind Body Ritual Challenge. But to just kind of hone in here on recognizing that when you start to play with this and make it into a challenge for yourself, you have that accountability piece starting to come in. You have the consistency starting to develop. You're not just playing this game with yourself of, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've done this myself, where it's just dabbling. You're completely dabbling. You're like, well, this YouTube video looks good. I'll do this meditation. This one says it's X number of hertz. It's going to open my heart chakra. Tell me you haven't done it, because I think we've all been there at some point where it's just a dabbling. It's just dabbling and recognizing I'm sort of establishing a connection. I'm sort of doing this. I'm sort of doing that. And it's the same with yoga. You know, I can tell you from personal experience before we dive into the mindset rituals is like I've been around the block with challenges and different ways to connect to the mind-body connection. I started a lot with yoga and Kundalini yoga. Those were some of the top things that I was learning at the time when I first started awakening. And then I started to connect more to the mindset side, where I'd go into mantra meditations and intention setting practices. And then I did, May Cause Miracles by Gabby Bernstein, which is like spiritual prayer and intention setting, and then kind of playing with that. And then I've done also challenges where we do 30 days of meditation or Sanskrit meditations. And then I've also played around with the body practices as well, where, I moved on from yoga to Pilates, and then I've moved on even further to, hardcore exercise and so forth. So I'm not new to recognizing that between all of these things, showing up for an oracle reading every day, to just randomly dabbling in meditation, to recognizing that you can show up for 40 days of Kundalini yoga and start to reconnect to your body and your hormones and detoxifying yourself and so forth. It's a matter of recognizing what the heck do you need and what is your system asking for? Because at the time, that was what I needed. I enjoyed the Kundalini yoga at the time because I was in postpartum phase of having my son, or was it my daughter? No, it was my daughter. Having my daughter, and it's after having a toddler running around. And I just needed to reestablish connection to myself and reconnect to my hormones. And that was really life-changing for me. But at the same time, I didn't have a mind practice. I wasn't really connecting to my spiritual practice as much. So you can start to see how you can kind of neglect one area over the other. So let's dive in to the mindset rituals and kind of bring this home. So when it comes to mindset rituals, the hugest thing I want you to realize is this is the one that most people focus on the most, like the most. Like we often focus more on mindset than anything else. And then we wonder why we feel like crap. And this is part of the problem because we need to recognize that mindset work is a valuable tool, but it can be abused and it can be overcompensated and overrun. But at the same time, when we need a mindset ritual, this is where things get interesting because you often need a mindset ritual when you're overstimulated, unfocused, lacking clarity, and you feel very stuck in your life, in your thought process, and most of all, maybe you have lost sight of the power of intention as a whole. Now, I'm not going to veer off too far into intention setting because we could be here all day, but I want to focus more on the fact of when you reestablish connection to a mindset practice, you're literally honing your mind. So in some terms, I think, Tony Robbins talks about priming. That's exactly what you're doing when you start to focus on a mindset practice is you're priming the mind for a particular, a lot of people prime it for success. You prime, your mind in terms of affirmations for love, abundance, and so forth. Intention setting is a powerful practice because it literally teaches to hone your mind like a laser. But if the body component isn't locked in, then it's kind of like, it's like a toss up between recognizing that you're doing the work, but there's a disconnection. So the mindset work is really powerful for when you need to get rid of the gunk, the mental clutter, the overwhelm, that feeling of being overstimulated and kind of lost. I feel like my shoulders are tightening just thinking about it. But that's really what happens is the mindset practice for me, I always feel like is self-care because it allows me to do a brain spill, a brain dump, get all the thoughts out, start to organize the thoughts, start to strategize, or even start to organize the thoughts and recognize that I can use the power of focus to move me forward. And when you start to establish a mindset ritual, not just are you focusing on, let's just be blunt here, the negative self-talk, like you're focusing on, why me? You start to focus more on how you can shift and reframe some of this negative self-talk, this negative beliefs, these negative language patterns. And then we start to reestablish connection to encouragement, empowerment, focusing on empowering ourselves from the inside out, positive self-talk, and start to reestablish that connection to self. You know what I'm talking about? Because when we start to recognize that that is what's going on, then we're not just working on the mind or the soul, we're also connecting that piece of what's happening in the mind. What's going on? Why are you being so negative to yourself? Why are you beating yourself up? It's like, it's one thing to focus on the emotional component, but also to recognize that there's the mind component too going on. You feel a certain way, but it's being rooted by how you're talking to yourself. What are you saying to yourself about yourself? How are you treating yourself and so forth? So that's a different conversation of mindset work where you have to ask yourself, well, am I neglecting that part of myself? Am I not practicing ahimsa with myself? And when we look at our spirituality as a whole, right? Like we could be doing tons and tons of spiritual work on ourselves, but then we're like heavily neglecting our self-talk. That's a conversation in itself where we feel like we're working with spirit, but then we're beating ourselves up. We're hard on ourselves. We're not having kindness to ourselves and so forth. And so that conversation can look more like developing a mind ritual to hone your focus, to have focused direction on where you're going in life, even setting goals for yourself And that teaches the subconscious, improves to the subconscious that you're starting to rewrite your reality. And now we're moving more into manifesting territory, right? So we start to realize that as I change my thoughts, I'm changing my feelings, I'm changing my habits, I'm changing my behaviors. And then I start to regulate. Now I'm a powerhouse moving forward because I have the confidence, I have the empowerment, I have the encouragement, and now I'm allowing myself to move forward. That's the power of a mindset ritual. And in recognizing that when we establish a mindset ritual, we're not just willy-nilly just brain dumping. We're also honing in like a laser beam on what we want to focus on, where we want to go, what we want to do, and who we want to be. And most of all, changing that self-talk, recognizing the power of your words, and recognizing, words are spells. What are you casting over your reality? What you put out is what you get, and so forth. If that's not happening, then that's where the real work begins. Because once you start to establish that with the body, that's where it really kicks in. Okay. So that's what it looks like to reestablish connection. So we have those 3 pillars, right? Regulation, intuition, focus, direction. When those 3 things are happening, it's incredible how much transformation you can start to experience, because now you're just not willy-nilly dabbling. You're not just sort of showing up for your practice. You are consistently strengthening your intuition, regulating your body, developing strategies, or almost as if you're connecting to yourself in a way where you know what needs to heal and what needs to shift and change, and you're giving your system what it needs. And then from that experience, what happens? The mind body reconnects. All right, so that was the majority of what I wanted to cover. Do you have any questions? Because I know this was really, really deep. Okay. I'm going to give you guys a few seconds. Oh, I know what we didn't. We didn't talk about repetition. Okay, so one of the final things I want to mention, and we'll talk more about repetition tomorrow because that will really bring everything full circle. But as you'll recognize, repetition is what builds safety. And so this reestablishes the connection even further, right? This is what Reconnect is all about, is reconnecting to self. And to recognize that repetition builds safety, builds natural consistency. And so this is where the conversations start to shift more so from I'm showing up, kind of, sort of, maybe, into I need motivation to show up, to these are the reasons why I want to show up. And I'm going to consistently start to show up to create the reason of recognizing that I'm building my subconscious to recognize and give it proof that this is safe and prove itself right. So to break that down really further is to recognize that when I show up and regulate my body, it's like a stepping stone. And then I do it again, and 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 I do it again. And now I have momentum. And this consistency is going to start building safety. And when it starts to do this, now we're in a habit. So we start to do it over and over and over and over again. And it's not showing up 7 days a week. It's about reestablishing how many days a week is sustainable for you. How many days a week can you show up? How many days a week, how much time can you show up, and so forth. Because it's not about a 2-hour practice. It's about giving yourself what you need. That's the difference. And recognizing when you have that consistency in the repetition starting to happen, not just are we reestablishing safety either, we're starting to recognize we're strengthening that muscle. So it's almost as if, and this is like a fun little segue, is recognizing that it's kind of like a workout. It's kind of like training. You're in a training ground with your intuition, right? And so when you show up for those daily reps, when you show up and power that muscle, when you show up again and again and again and again and again, now you are reestablishing that connection to your higher self. So instead of being inconsistent, dabbling all over the place, now what's happening is you're showing up. You're showing up consistently, daily, or you're showing up weekly. And what's happening is you are building a muscle. You're building a muscle with your soul. You're building a muscle with your higher self. You're reestablishing that it's more normal to connect to higher self than it is to be dysregulated. You're reestablishing a connection to higher self in relationship that it's easier to connect to higher truth within yourself versus the ego. And this is where it gets really cool. And I just want to hone in on this really quickly. So stay with me here. Recognizing that the more that you build that muscle, the negative thoughts, the negative emotions, the dysregulation starts to get smaller. It starts to dissipate. Because what you'll notice and you'll find is you're building it as a muscle. You're building it as a habit. You're building it. You are building the compound effect with your practice. That is incredibly powerful to witness, to feel in your body, and most of all, to reestablish the mind-body connection. Because what's happening behind the scenes is you show up consistently. Now you are starting to regulate yourself easier and easier. When you reestablish connection with your spiritual practice, you're starting to strengthen your relationship to your intuition and higher self. What's that going to do? It's going to start to strengthen your intuition over the ego. When we think about this systematically, what's that going to do? Well, your intuition is going to start becoming stronger. It's going to start to strengthen the intuition muscle so that you start to hone in more on your natural gifts and you'll start to receive them more because you're honing in on your intuition. And so when you do that consistently, what's going to happen? Well, now you don't just understand your intuition all willy-nilly, like, hey, I'm a psychic. I get like a vision on occasion. I wonder what that means. Maybe I'll check my oracle cards. Instead, you recognize, oh, I'm getting a download right now. I should completely scrape that entire idea and focus on the membership. Whereas before it was, I don't know, maybe should I? I don't know if that's a great idea. Maybe there's a lot of doubt. So instead, what occurs is you start to hone in, and that strengthens the muscle. And then the same thing with the mindset, right? When you start to hone in on your mindset, less negative self-talk, more positive self-talk. You recognize that you're creating a domino effect with your own nervous system. And that's what reestablished the mind-body connection. How cool is that? And that's what we're going to be covering in the Mind Body Ritual Challenge. And we start in May. So if you are interested in joining, if you'd like to take this work even further, definitely reach out to me. I will be diving headfirst into this tomorrow. But for right now, I want you to also consider, as we wrap up here, your soul work today is to start to bring attention to this and to ask yourself a couple of valuable questions, okay? So the first one is, where do I feel the most depleted or empty in regard to my practices? So for example, do I feel the most depleted in my body, in my mind, or in my soul, in my spiritual practices? And what I want you to also do in relationship to soul work is to start to look at asking yourself these questions. What does my body need? What does my soul need? What do my mind need? Because at the end of the day, when you start to become aware, now we're starting to recognize, what does the system need? And then as we do that, we regulate, we strengthen, we empower, and so forth. And that's what it means to reestablish the mind-body connection. So if you guys have any questions at all, it is time for questions. do not hesitate to ask. I love questions. All right, I'm seeing some people. Hey, Kathy. No problem. Yeah, I was really pumped today because it was cardio day and I was just like in it to win it. So I knew exactly what I wanted to cover today. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't waste your time and gave you a lot of value in relationship to why the mind body connection is so powerful, because we talk about it all the time. But when we start to break it down systematically, this is where we can start to see that it's not just a willy nilly, like I'm balancing my chakras, I'm getting that energetic connection. But what we're actually learning is that when we start to work on these particular ways of the mind body connection, we're strengthening who we are as a person, and that allows us to emotionally heal. It allows us to manifest easier, and we create transformation in our bodies. Okay. I think that was all I wanted to cover. Okay. Thank you for hanging out with me. If you watch the replay, definitely, if you have any questions at all, do not hesitate to ask, reach out. You can email me at support@theawakenstate.net if it's a personal question. And also, I do want to mention that I will be offering sessions. This is something that I haven't done in a while, but we are officially at a new era and a new phase, and it's what intuitively feels right now. So I am going to be opening up one-on-one sessions alongside of the challenge. So this is going to be a fun little transition where you can also work with me on a one-on-one capacity. If you are interested in that, don't hesitate to reach out either at support@theawakenstate.net. And most importantly, we have day 3 where we're going to bring all of this together in return to self, same time. I also want to talk about the time. Does anyone feel like I could have offered this in the evening? Because I know some people work. So if maybe next time when we do the live challenge, I will try to do it at like 6 or 7 o'clock at night. So that way people who get off work can enjoy the challenge in real time too. If that is one of you, please let me know in the comments, because I have contemplated that. I recognize that doing challenges at 11 in the morning is like a little bit awkward in terms of scheduling, but it was what works for me as a mom. So here we are. How do you listen to your gut without ego? Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Well, like it's important to differentiate between the intuition and the ego. Like recognizing that intuition is first response. It's comes without much thinking at all, whereas ego is often, it kind of is a stream of consciousness thought where it's how to describe this. Ego thought is often not just negative, but it's ruminating. It's like worrying thoughts. It's about, let's see, we lower 3 chakras. I'm having actual physical sensations in the gut. How do you listen to your gut without ego? Okay, so I'm getting immediately solar plexus here and working more with the solar plexus and recognizing that, figuring out the difference, how you personally connect to intuition versus what does it feel like when you're in fear, uncertainty, doubt, ego, because they are 2 different sensations. Like intuition comes without much thought. It is the first response. It comes without much thinking. It's very much like you don't even notice that you're having intuition before you experience intuition, because it's just so automatic. Whereas ego is like ruminating, overthinking, over analyzing, second guessing yourself, doubting yourself, and so forth. Does that make more sense? I feel like when we get into understanding that awareness piece, it's also about just kind of looking at, okay, well, when I'm intuitive, what's happening? When I'm in fear and ego, what's happening? And starting to just bring awareness to what are the behaviors that come up for that. I actually have a good video on that on the YouTube channel. I think it's called, Is It Ego or Is It Intuition? You might want to check out that, because that will help break it down further for you. Okay. Any more questions? I love questions. Give me more questions. I love questions. All right. And as always, if you're watching this at random, make sure you watch day 1 because it will make so much more sense going into day 2 and day 3. Finally, I think we covered it all. Okay. All right. So I hope you deeply enjoyed this unique experience on reconnection. And I will see you for day 3. Okay. All right. Yeah. She says, yes. Yes. Good. I'm glad. And I highly recommend that YouTube video. I think it's, is it ego or intuition? I will leave a comment with the video actually when we log off. I'll do that. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Any final burning desires? Okay. Okay. It looks like we are good for now. If people watching the replay also have questions, because like I said, this was a lot today, don't hesitate to drop a comment and reach out to me personally. Then there's the whole, if you're interested in a session, reach out to me about that. There will be an application thing coming soon next week. And we also will have the Mind Body Ritual Challenge opening. All right. I'll talk to you guys next time. Have a beautiful day.